All right, here's another installment of tournament-style chess problem solutions. At the level that I'm doing these, some of these are getting to be ridiculously difficult. I'm just mentioning that, which explains why sometimes they take longer than others. Okay, we do 4 things every problem: checks, captures, piece contacts, and situation. Plus, I always look at the problem and mention what jumps out at me. We also do this, we make the moves after we've figured it out. We don't just take a stab, make a move, go back, take another stab, which you can do, but you're not going to solve the problem for the points. So, we do this like a tournament. We look at our position, study it, analyze it, confirm what we see, and when we are satisfied that we've done the best we can, then we make our move and take our chances. Just like a real tournament. Okay, now the first thing that stands out to me, that just jumps out right out at me, is that in this one, our knight is pinned by his queen and he's attacked it with a pawn. That freak. He's trying to win my knight. That's just rude. I'll have you know. Now, we don't have any checks or captures at all. None. We got no checks and no captures. Okay, so those are out of the question. The situation, as my dad would say, situation, deep freeze. Because we're about to lose a knight here, which is not cool. So piece contacts, we have stuff like, well, we don't have knight to do anything because it's pinned. But another move that jumps out at me is f3. The value of f3 is that queen takes f3, knight takes queen. Well, he's not going to do that. He's not an idiot. But f3 does force his queen to do something. He can't just sit there like a bump on a log. If he sits there, we take his queen. You know me, I'm the kind of guy that would play pawn takes queen. But, so f3, I don't have to look around at a lot of stuff. You're under the pressure of pawn takes free knight. So f3 also uncorks a discovered attack against his bishop. So, it looks to me like f3, he has to play something like, to maintain the pin, he has to go queen e1 or queen to e4. That's the only choices he has. He can't sit there, he can't take it. Queen to e3 loses a queen. So there you go. Out of 3 moves his queen can make, 2 of them are good. Queen to e4 and queen to e1. Now, queen to e4 may not be that good because we'd have knight to f6. I'm not saying it's great, but hey, you get a free attack at a queen, you got to look at it. So it looks to me that if he goes queen to e4, knight f6, and he goes to queen to e1 where he should have gone in the first place. That's his problem, okay? So we assume that our opponent plays the best move, at least the best move that we could find. And in that case, f3, queen to e1 appears to be the best move. Now, he could play queen to b5 check, but we would just retreat our knight from e5 and go knight d7, ha ha, you're not going to win my queen. So that is a fairly obvious move. You could even play queen to d7, and if you want to trade queens, queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and you're completely safe. That's a possibility too, whatever floats your boat. f3 to me is the move, discovering an attack on his bishop. He goes queen to e1. To me, that's the best move. Then, well, we can play bishop takes c1. Because that answers the problem. If he takes it with the queen, our knight's no longer pinned. When we get out of dodge, probably knight takes g4 is a good move. So we can just play knight takes g4, and for all practical purposes, we're relatively safe. So really, we have nothing better. It's time to play f3. Queen to b5. What a freak. Well, like I said, we do have another possibility that just occurred to me. This guy might be crazy. You know what? Queen to b5 to me looks like it's a bad move, because we can play c6. I mean, this one move wasn't unexpected, as you can tell. Now, I was thinking, you know, queen d7 or knight d7, and I'm like, but you know, the problem is our bishop is under attack, and if it's captured, we cannot recapture it, because if he plays knight takes g5, h takes d5 costs us a rook. So we better play c6. We need to get time for this bishop to move. So c6. He plays d takes c6. He's going to have a discovered check, but it's not a problem, because c7 check is queen d7, and we just move out of the threat. So c6, and now his bishop is under assault. Yeah, I don't care about this, buddy. Eat that. c7 is a nothing move. Queen d7, wah, wah. He's messed up, okay? That wasn't too difficult. 2400. I've played some other ones that were way harder than that were much lower. But whatever, it's fine. Problem solved. Now, here we go. Look at this guy. Now, this superstar is asking for trouble. The question is, well, probably two questions here. We can play Desperado and see what happens, which would be knight captures queen. Well, let's look at this for a second. Material is dead even. Each side has 16, original pieces. So let's just go through the brute force Desperado. Knight takes queen, bishop takes queen. Our knight doesn't have a good move after that, really. We do have knight to e3, which is pretty good. Does threaten knight takes c2 check, which is a biggie. So I'm thinking knight takes queen. Okay, every time I notice something, I go back to the start of the sequence. Okay, so I sometimes don't mention that I'm restarting the sequence, but you'll get the drift. Knight takes queen, bishop takes queen, knight to e3. Now his bishop is hanging on d8 to my knight or my king, and I'm also threatening knight takes c2 check. So to stop knight takes c2 check, he has to play, in my opinion, king to d2 doesn't get it, because I play knight takes bishop on f1 check and then eat his bishop. If he plays rook to a2, again, I could eat his bishop. In fact, that's probably the best move. And that way I don't worry about him moving his bishop out. That knight is dead. That's the problem with the knight. That knight is a dead piece. Whether it's on d1 or e3, eventually it cannot escape outside of, say, knight takes bishop, which trades it off, which is fine, or knight takes c2 check. So to me, my original thinking was f6, kicking the knight, kicking the bishop back, but he could just play knight takes knight, and I play pawn takes bishop, and I get an inferior structure, which isn't bad. Material is still even, but I recognize we always want to look at the Desperado, which is you take, he takes, I take, you take, whatever. So knight takes queen, bishop takes queen to maintain material equality. Everything else loses. Pretty obvious. And then knight to e3, to me, is a killer move, because we're moving out of capture with a threat of capturing the f1 bishop or capturing the c2 pawn. To me, this is already over. That simple. That one wasn't too difficult. It says 2639. No way, Jose. But that's one of those things that I'm very good at Desperado. So sometimes you're better at certain things than others, and people go, "That was so hard." You're like, "That was easy," and then vice versa. You're like, "Oh man, that was the hardest thing I ever did." "Oh, that was easy. I did it," and whatever. So everyone's different. You're good at certain things. I'm good at certain things. Whatever. We just try to get better doing whatever we're doing. Okay. Now, this is weird. What kind of move is that? What the heck kind of move is this? We're 2 pieces down is what we are. Okay, so that makes it a little less bizarre, I guess. I'm like, man, rook takes queen. I'm going to play rook takes queen. You know. So, rook takes queen. Let's say knight takes rook. That dude has got a rook, bishop, and a knight for my queen. He's still ahead on that deal. So, this jerk. Now, here's an interesting idea. That doesn't quite work, but it was interesting. Rook takes queen, knight takes rook, rook to f8. I'm x-ray attacking the f2 square. But he could literally just play rook to f1 or knight back to e3 and, as my dad would say, so what? I can't argue with him. So what? So that doesn't work. But I like rook takes queen. We're down material, and that I don't see that rook doing more than this to begin with. Our other rook cannot really do jack diddly squat to him. And our queen doesn't have anything. Our queen only has a really good attack square on d5 if we take the queen. So again, rook takes queen, knight takes rook, queen d5 check. See what happens. Okay, so now things might get better because he has to go back and defend his rook. Okay, which is either on g1 or on h2. So what happens there, it looks to me like we infiltrate. Because if he doesn't defend, if he doesn't go to g1 or h2, we play queen takes free rook, and you better believe I'm going to take the free rook. Okay, so king g1 loses outright to rook d1 check. This is basic, but we have to mention this because just because you see something or I see something, if we don't mention it, we don't know if the other guy sees it. So you probably saw rook d1 check would win, but I mention all these things so in case you don't see it, you see it now. It's better to be told a move that you see, which confirms that you saw it, or than to assume you see a move that you don't see and then you miss the lesson. So, rook takes queen, knight takes rook, queen d5 check. Looks very strong. He only has one good move. You know the rule. If he has only one good move, doesn't lose, we're probably winning. So we're probably winning with king h2. My thinking here is that, well, I mean, the rook can't do anything, so we have to move our queen. The best square for the queen, to me, is queen to f3. We're infiltrating. We're behind his knight, threatening to take it. And we might also be threatening a checkmate with queen f2 check, followed by rook d1 mate. So, and every time I speak about these things, etc., I always go back and redo the sequence in the chess tournament. What I'm speaking to you is what I speak to myself in my brain silently during the chess tournament. I always restart. Rook takes queen, knight takes rook, queen d5 check, king h2 is basically forced. Queen to f3 seems to be the best infiltration move. Now, he could go, you know, knight back to e3 if he wants to, because it's a pretty good move. Our rook just doesn't have a good infiltration point. Although he goes knight to e3, we could play rook to d3. I mean, he does have material on a1 and c1, but they're not moving. They haven't moved yet. So our advantage, oh, actually, after knight e3, we have to consider rook to g8 as well. So we have to consider that move. And then another move that down the road would bear some consideration would be e4. You know, our advantage is temporarily. We have a queen and a rook attacking a king defended by a rook and a knight, and half defended by a bishop. So his rook in the a1 corner is really out of the game and does not appear to be much of a player. So rook takes, knight takes, queen d5 check, king h2, queen f3. Knight e3 looks like a pretty good move. Well, he could, I mean, well, we're threatening to take his knight, so he can't move his bishop. If he moves his knight to e3, though, he's locking his bishop down, which is good for us. You know, and I'm thinking the rook needs to go somewhere. d3, we could try to win 2 pieces for a rook, but he could play, well, yeah, he could play rook to, oh. I'm thinking, here's what I saw. Okay, let's go through the whole sequence. Rook takes queen, knight takes rook, queen d5 check, king h2, queen f3, knight e3, rook d3. I saw he could play rook to e1 defending the knight, but I get queen to f2 check. The only thing that can defend that rook on e1 would be knight to g2, but look what those queen and rook, when he moves the knight, queen to g3 check. Now we're getting somewhere. The knight is on g2, king is on h2, so he has to play king to either h1 or g1. Well, king to g1, because if he goes to h1, it's queen takes h3 check, followed by king to g1 anyway. So, we got that. We're making huge progress. King, so queen takes g3, check, king to g1. Now, what kind of, as Bugs Bunny would say, what kind of deviltry can I engage in? We have what? No more checking. There's no more checks here. But I'd like to play. That's a real tempting sequence. That rook to d3 is real tempting because it's not terrible, but I mean, he still can't move that bishop. And queen, you know, queen takes h3 would be decent, I guess. You know, I would think we have a mating attack rather than just winning 2 more pawns. Winning a queen and 2 pawns for a rook is pretty good, but his knight and rook are able to defend his king fairly well. Man, If this isn't it, I don't know what is. It just has to be. He's done everything. He's done everything we said he was going to do. So my thinking is that it seemed fairly obvious that this was the correct sequence. All right. So due to the complexity of this problem, I went through and made these moves as I would do in tournament, and then we have a new problem that it's a lot easier for us to visualize now, another 5 to 7 moves in advance, rather than tack on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. We've just taken 6 moves out of our mental memory that we don't have to worry about anymore. We can spend all of our mental memory on the upcoming moves rather than those 6 that we don't need to worry about, because those were obviously the best moves. So let's look again. Wow, we could. Oh man. Check. Knight to there. Queen checks. Seems like, instead of doing rook d3 and hoping he goes rook to e1, we just go check him anyway. Queen f2 check forces. Remember the rule. He's got one move. Queen f2 check. The only move is knight g2. And then let's hit him with rook to d3, threatening to take. Oh, that's nasty. Yeah, we're threatening to take on g3 because queen takes g3 check, king g1, rook d1 is mating. Absolutely, the knight is pinned again. Queen f2 check. Okay, looks like the absolute winner because knight is here. Rook d3. Oh, that jerk, he can move his bishop. I just saw that. Oh no, he can't move that bishop there. I got a pawn here. That's why that pawn is there. He can't defend g3, and that's the key. g3 cannot be defended. You're dead, dude. Rook d3. Thank you for the free bishop. Thank you for the free pawn and check. Yes, king h1. We'd check him. He'd go to here. We'd go rook to e2. He can't defend this. So, fantastic sequence, right? Pretty awesome. I'm on fire with 3 in a row. That was a 2600 puzzle. I'm getting better, dude. Okay. Same business. Wowzers. Interesting. He's under a back rank mate threat from my queen. Queen e1 check, queen to f1. Oh, he just loses. Dude, this is sick. Queen e1 check, queen f1 forced. Knight to f3 check. Whoops. Pawn takes, he can't move his king. If he moves his king, queen takes queen, checkmate. Pawn takes knight, rook to g6, check. Whoops, you're dead. He's gone. This took less than 45 seconds. Hey, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. Goodbye. You just saw me eat a 2400 problem in under 60 seconds, and that included confirmation. Hey, like I said, man, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. That one was fairly easy. But you got to know stuff. You've got to see that knight check. Okay. Well, let's see what we got now. Good question. Well, you see, he's threatening to take our queen. What a freak. Well, it's not terrible. let's look at this for a second. We could go rook takes rook check. Queen takes rook is forced. Then we could play a couple of moves. Either knight or queen could take on d4. If knight takes on d4, he takes my queen. I hit him with knight takes bishop check, king to f1, knight takes rook, king takes knight. And he's got 3, 4, 5 pawns against our 6. We won a pawn. Congratulations. You win a cookie. That's from a movie you haven't seen, most of you, called Kelly's Heroes. Tremendous war movie. We're not here to win a cookie. All right? So, rook takes rook check, queen takes rook. What about queen takes d4? That gets out of trouble and also threatens to take his rook. I mean, that's not the greatest move in town, but we'll take it. Now, technically, we could reverse this entire sequence and play queen takes d4 first. You know, this would be based upon, we have an in-between move, which is rook takes rook check. So because of this in-between move, well, rook takes rook is an in-between move for both sides, except for white, it's not check. And usually the in-between move is a move made with check as the number one byproduct, or number two, it is a threat that is so strong that it's as good or better than check. Usually in-between move tends to be like rook takes rook check. In this case, we'd go queen takes d4. He takes my queen, you know, and then I go rook takes rook check. He goes king g2, knight takes queen, and he's just lost the rook for nothing. If I go queen takes d4, he goes rook takes rook. Well, I go queen takes queen, because your rook takes rook is not with check. Mine was. So I'd take his queen. He'd play rook takes rook check, king takes rook, and I have knight and queen against rook and bishop. So the idea of rook takes rook check for me as the first move is important to look at. But I'm thinking now that queen takes d4 might be the move, because we have triple threats. We have queen takes rook threat, queen takes queen threat, also rook takes rook check. The problem with queen takes queen for him is that it removes the only defender of his e1 rook. So queen takes d4 looks like the absolute winner, because you have a triple problem that he can't handle, apparently. Because I'm threatening literally to take his queen. So he could go queen takes d4. He could play queen to c3, guarding the rook, guarding this rook. But nope, that loses. He cannot leave his queen under attack of my queen. So he could go. Again, that doesn't work. His queen is overloaded is the problem. This is what's showing up here, okay? So he couldn't go queen to c3 because queen takes queen. We cannot go to queen to c1 because queen takes c5. And I'm on his queen again. I play queen takes c5. His c1 queen only defends one of the two rooks at one time. He cannot defend both. His queen is an overloaded defender. That's what happens here. Queen takes d4 wins. He's overloaded. Or she's overloaded. Thank you. Appreciate it. Cakewalk. Another 2,400. 5 in a row. Well, you can't do better than 5 in a row. You can just match it, okay? This is the thing. I've been doing problems for these videos for like, you know, I've always been doing problems. But really, for my videos, I decided I was going to really buckle down and, you know, hit it as hard as I can and see what happens. And, well, you see one of the results is this one. I just ranked back. This is not the first time. This is the second time I've been above 2,600 on problems. But I just went 5-0. which is an absolutely terrific score. Even a grandmaster wouldn't do better than this. He would just do it all faster. Okay? And that's how the difference would be shown. Whatever time it took for this video, he would do it much faster than I would. As a pro, you would expect so. But that was a terrific problem, but that's what is known as an overloaded defender. That queen is defending 3 things right now. And G3 by white looks like a good move. He creates space for his king to remove a back rank threat. But it's an absolutely double question mark move. But it's not obvious at all. It certainly didn't jump out at me. I looked at that rook takes rook. I'm like, queen takes d4. And this is how it works in tournament games. It's happened before. It's like, and then I realized, hey, you know what? Let's reverse this move order. Let's take that pawn first because his queen is overloaded. He has, well, I mean, he could technically have played, again, queen to b4. It just loses his queen, obviously, so we didn't look at that move. I only looked at moves for his queen to move where it was defended. And the problem is his queen was not defended. He needed to play, instead of g3, he clearly needed to play rook takes rook. Hey, it happens. Even masters make mistakes. He should have played rook takes rook. I played rook takes rook. Then he plays g3, and I just win the d4 pawn, and it's all good. He's got 5 pawns, we've got 6. And the game continues. But this queen is an overloaded defender. Not obviously so. Sometimes it's obvious, for basic level problems. But we got him with the overload. Crunch. And I mean crunch. What was this problem? This problem was 2446, 2639, 2671, 2462, and then 2435. So that is that's a 2500 plus average. Terrific stuff. I wish I could play chess this good all the time. Unfortunately, I can't. It's just, I don't know, maybe I could. I don't want to spend all day playing one game. I did that once. Back when I was younger, my dad and I went to US Open and goofed around and played. I mean, I did okay. But I had one game that lasted for 10 hours. You don't want to do that. I drew the game against a strong master. So the result was great. But we were there all night. The game started at 7 in the evening and ended at 5 in the morning. He was a much older guy. He was, close to my age that I am now. He was definitely over 50. I was like 22. So the tournament director was like, do you guys want to continue or do you want to adjourn the game and come back? Let's continue. I'm 22. I'll run this old man into the dirt, okay? So, tough game, tough game. That guy, I had a rook, he had a rook and a bishop. And that is a drawn endgame if you don't screw it up. 110 moves, 108. Either 108, 110, whatever it was. It's a lot of moves anyway. Held the draw, great. But messed up my sleeping. Probably destroyed his too. He was dumb because he thought that he was going to, he gambled that he was going to outplay me in an all-night affair, giving up 30 years of age difference. Now, on the other hand, he's 30 years more experienced than me. So it's a gamble. He took the gamble. It didn't pay off for him. Didn't pay off 100% for me either, but it was okay. It was an experience. Retrospectively, he should have accepted my draw early on and goes, you know what, man, forget this. This is too difficult to win. He had to know it was a draw. He was a really good player, so there's no way he didn't know this was a drawn position. He was just sometimes egotistical, whatever. I knew it was a draw. He had to know it was a draw. He went for it and failed to, force an error on my part. So it's all good. But I don't want to play a 10-hour game ever again, I'm telling you. All right? Did it once, didn't lose. That was great. Don't do it again. So, hey, whatever happens, you pay your money, you take your chances. So I did all right. It was a good experience. My dad was there the whole time. I'm like, man, it was kings. I had one rook. He had one rook and one bishop. And so my dad was there the whole time coming back and forth. I'm like, oh man, this is terrible. Just go to sleep, But he couldn't do it. He had to watch and, make sure. And in his mind, he's like, it was the only guy, my dad was the only person I knew that would watch the game. And there was off and on 5 to 10 people. I mean, a handful of people stuck around, like idiots. Most of them left. But, some came back. I don't know why, whatever. Doesn't matter. It was crazy. It was, a handful of people who saw the game. I mean, I guess they were probably, the tournament director would be there and or assistant tournament directors. So there was always someone there. There was nothing going on. I mean, where else would you be but in the tournament room watching two idiots play for a draw? It's pretty funny. So, there was nothing better to do. I mean, I know that at one point, I didn't ask. I just, I've been in a lot of tournaments. It looked like the tournament staff director guys were working on, just clerical work, pairings and things of that stuff you had to do anyway. There's nothing to do. Two idiots are playing. Well, as an official, go there in, close to where they are. Keep an eyeball in case something weird happens. Nothing weird happened. But, just like, you're in the ballpark. You got to do what you have to do anyway. So you could do it anywhere, in your room or in the tournament hall where a game is actually occurring. Any tournament director would just do that stuff in the room like they were doing, whatever they were doing. So, it was nothing really weird, but it was just, an oddball, once in a lifetime opportunity. So that's why, I'm like, I'm not killing myself with these, this stuff. There's just not money to be made in tournament chess. Like there once was back then. There was, some decent prizes and whatever, but it was good. So the key thing is, 5-0, terrific performance. I can't complain. You saw the games. These were killer. This one is only 35% passing. I didn't think it was that difficult. But, whatever. Everybody's different. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Where is this? Let's look at this 2671 again. Pass rate 46%. Okay. Yeah, this was pretty tough, right? I mean, it was obvious that we needed to take his queen. But the part that wasn't obvious was the queen f3 infiltration. This is the part that's this was really probably the most difficult decision. Because it's not obvious. You're not checking him. You're just threatening to take a piece. And he's going to go back to that bishop guardian square because that looks like solid as heck. And it was. But that infiltration was just a killer when I really looked at it, after I decided to, go for the queen d5 and queen f3 infiltration. I was able to get closer to the end of the problem, or get the garbage behind us. So I don't have to continue. I don't want to do this, okay? I did not want to sit here and run through this mentally, which I can do, and I'm going to do it for you right now, just to show you. I didn't want to do this. Rook takes queen is 1. Knight takes rook is 2. Queen d5 is 3. King h2 forced was 4. Queen f3 is 5. Knight e3 is 6. Queen f2 check is 7. Knight g2 is 8. Rook d3 is 9. Rook d3 is 9, which is winning. I don't remember what he did, but he did whatever and he's dead. Okay, I didn't want to look at that anymore at 9 deep. I'm visualizing this 9 deep when clearly we can knock off a bunch of these. Okay, we can get down there to queen f2 check, and at that point it's obvious what's happening. But so let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This part was absolutely obvious. So that's 5 out of there. 6, 7, 8, 9. And then he did that stupidity on move 10. Well, objectively, you play bishop to e3 rather than resign, but it's the same thing, okay? He could play rook to g1 isn't going to cut the mustard. There's nothing he can do to stop. That was when I realized, remember when I realized that he couldn't play bishop to f4. That's the move he wanted to play. If he plays bishop to f4, we are in trouble. But that e5 pawn prevents that, so we were good. So at move 10, he does the stupidity, and I take it. But what's happening, like I said, I couldn't even remember what he did. I had seen bishop to e3. I couldn't remember it. And that's why I went through what I went through. That was, to me, it was obvious. We get into queen to f3, and then let's reset from queen to f3 position. Because then everything is much simpler. After knight to e3, that was when I was, if you go back, you'll see that queen f2 check, well, he has to put the knight there, and then I realized shortly that rook d3 attacks g3, which is undefendable. He cannot defend g3, and that's when I know he's dust. But going through the obvious stuff that I had to was fine. But looking back here through all this, I'm going queen to f3, queen to f2 check, knight g2, rook to d3. I can see that fairly easily. And I'm like, well, can he defend g3? I don't think he can. And he couldn't. But it's a little foggier. Let's put it that way. It's a little foggier, and you have chances of error. That when you see that the sequence is so strong, with, like I said, you follow my rule. My rule helps when when the king has one move, you're probably winning. Okay, we got to the square. He had one move. King g1, he gets wrecked. He gets wrecked on king to g1. You know, we're going to hit him for sure. Check. Check again. He's getting wrecked. And then rook will mate. Okay, so he's king to g1, he gets wrecked. Can't go there. He has to defend the rook, so that's why I said, you know, it's forced, which is a sign that we're winning, probably, like 99%. Queen to f3 was, you know, the only infiltration move I could see. Queen to e4 is clearly inferior. We want to get as deep into this position as possible. Okay, he goes to, you know, knight to e3, it's just fine. And once we got here, now the fog is lifted. We were able to still see all these moves, but now if you look at queen f2 check, knight g2, rook to d3 shows up way faster here, especially after you play it. But I mean, you could see this. Queen f2 check, this is forced, knight to g2, and rook to d3. The other option is rook to g3, but he'll just play g4. So rook to d3 comes up on your radar much faster and also clearer once you've gone through this, because the fog has been lifted and, you know, we're doing well. Okay, so that's really the deal. Because the problem with these kind of positions, okay, this is my problem. I don't know if this is your problem, but in my in my experience, this big opening gives you a lot of options, which makes it harder to calculate because you have to look at a lot more moves. That's the only deal. So that's why, you know, I've got to this. I'm like, okay, we're going to get to this queen f3. He goes here. We're like, oh, dude, we're kicking this guy's butt. We got to get this rook in. And the only way to do this is to check him and realize this is his only move. And now this rook has got some mobility to either the f file or the d file. And like I said, when you're in this position or the move before, you're like, oh man, the rook to d3, this g3 square is just getting annihilated. It's the proximity of your queen to his king that in my mind made rook to d3 an easy move to find. And that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to get this, or would like to make it easier than more difficult. So maybe this is helping you. That's the goal. That is the goal. The goal is to help get these down. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I enjoy it tremendous. And you know, like I said, you just can't beat 5-0. You can tie it, but you can't beat it. So hope you enjoyed it, man. It was terrific for me, I'm telling you. You guys know what to do. I'll talk to you later.